Hello, everyone. Just waiting for a couple of minutes and we'll be starting soon. Thank you very much.
Anal, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Rana. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Before we start, just wanted to inform that we have the interpretation possibility for Arabic. You can just kind of go to more on the top of the screen, click and choose language and speech, click on language interpretation and choose Arabic. My colleague Sarah will also paste it on the chat, so you will have the ability to see the different steps to choose Arabic. All right. Let's start. A couple of things before we start. This event will last around 90 minutes. It will be recorded and we will share it. We will post the recording on our website for those who are unable to attend. And we have a Q&A box, so feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A box. And we'll start with a presentation from our speakers, and then we will have a Q&A session. Before I introduce everybody, just want to introduce myself. For those who don't know me, my name is Manal Shhadi, and I'm the Deputy Regional Representative in MENA for KALP Network. And we're very happy to have you joining us for today's session. Without further delay, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have Luca Sangali. Luca is the National Coordinator in Palestine, chairing the National Cash Working Group, as well as the West Bank Cash Working Group, and overseeing cash coordination across the country. And he's been in this position since 2020. As well, we have Ahmed Abu Shammali, and he's leading the Gaza Cash Working Group. He joined OCHA since 2007, and he has over 17 years of experience in cash protection and advocacy. And Luca, I'm going to stop sharing from my side, and please go ahead.
Thanks, Manal. So let me share from my side. Good morning, everyone. So can you confirm you can see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting. Thanks, Manal, for the introduction. As Manal said, my name is Luca Sangali. I'm the coordinator of the Cash Working Group in Palestine. And my colleague Ahmad is also here as the coordinator of the Gaza Cash Working Group. And then we'll also get into a bit of what the coordination structure is in Palestine for you to be aware. Now, the presentation today really goes through about 3 sections. The first one is really on context and the MPCA program, quite descriptive of what the situation is, what we have been doing in terms of MPCA response, but also market analysis, advocacy, and all that kind of activities that the Cash Working Group does during emergencies. We then have a second section of the presentation that goes into challenges, lesson learned, and other elements that we think are interesting for the audience today. And then finally, we'll have just a couple of slides, a very quick overview on the West Bank. We would like just, to bring you on board on what happens there as well, gives a bit of fullness to the presentation, if you don't. So let us get started right away. We'll start the presentation with kind of an opening statement, if you want, and that's it. As long as there is any form of convertible trade in Gaza, cash transfers are relevant. Now, this is a sentence that was said by a UNICEF colleague during a cash working group meeting. I really felt it really captures and represents, the approach that cash actors had in Gaza since the 7th of October, especially when it came to going against the odds, if you want, of the situation and really showing cash was still an option. Cash is still an important one, a feasible one, and most importantly, does have an impact. And so we kind of use this sentence over a few documents or a few conversations we think is really representative of what we have been doing in Gaza so far. Now, jumping into the first section of our presentation, context and the MPCA response, I'll immediately hand over to my colleague Ahmad for a bit of an overview on the Gaza Strip. These are things that many of you might know, especially if you are from the region, especially have been following up with, Palestine over the years, but I think it's good to set a bit the tone of what we're talking about. So over to you, Ahmad.
Ahmed, we can't hear you.
I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see the videos. Is Ahmad online?
Ahmed is online, but we can't hear him.
Okay. So let me maybe get started here, and then as soon as this technical problem is solved, it can take over. Now, the Gaza Strip, very quickly, again, is occupied since 1970. So 67 has been living under siege now since 2007. So it's about 17 years. It's a very small place, 2.2 million people living there, significant majority of children and youth. And as many of you might know, it is considered one of the areas in the world with the highest density of population. Now, particularly relevant is that more than half of the population there, and that's pre-crisis information, already lived below the poverty line, with about an 80% estimated to depend or to need humanitarian assistance on a regular basis to meet their most basic needs. It has also one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, especially for youth and women as well. Now, finally, Gaza over the past 5 years, the past 17 years has experienced 5 major emergencies. Now, none has been probably as severe and as violent as the current one, but there's really a pattern of continuous conflict, escalation, destruction, reconstruction, and then all over again. Now, the cash working group has been there before, so there were some preparedness work that was done, over the past years that allowed us to hit the ground running when the situation escalated back in October. I'll just go through it very quickly, and then maybe when Ahmad can talk, you get back to these. First, MPCA was including intelligence and contingency plans that exist in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, for your knowledge. There was a well-established coordination structure for the cash working group. It has been around for years. There was knowledge and expertise on the context, on the markets, on the partners, on the kind of activities, on beneficiary preferences, and so on and so forth. And there was also at the very, very beginning of the crisis, an early mapping of cash actors to see who's around, who had capacity, etc. There were linkages with authorities, and that's relevant also for slides we are going to go through down the presentation. The situation is a bit strange, and I'll get into that in the next slide. But there were linkages with authorities at different levels. Both the Ministry of Social Development, but for example, as well, the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics that provides, statistics and figures that are relevant to our work. There were the annual plans, the work plans, if you want, of the cash working group included emergency components. There was an MEB and an SMEB developed pre-crisis with a fixed transfer value. And there was an FSP mapping that was initiated, not really a complete one done, but at least allowed us, to have a knowledge of who was around, and especially being able to contact them immediately and see their level of functionality. Now, on the 7th of October, you all know, the conflict started. There's been ongoing air, land, and sea bombardment. Since then, there were multiple evacuation orders. That's important for you to know. Starting the 13th of October, so immediately after the crisis, and now most areas of the Gaza Strip are affected by direct or indirect evacuation orders. The map here, the red areas are those affected by direct evacuation orders from the Israeli army. As you can see, the more than 50% of the Gaza Strip, or about 50%. And most importantly, the small river you see in the middle is Wadi Gaza, and pretty much everything that stands north of Wadi Gaza has been issued an evacuation order, and that's where the majority of the population before was living. And then the ground operation started on October 27. This basically led to the whole Gaza Strip being considered as people in need, 2.2 million, and also food insecure. About 75% of the population at the moment is internally displaced, mostly south of that small river of Wadi Gaza. And to give you a bit of a context, Rafah, which is the southernmost governorate of Gaza, had a pre-crisis population of 300,000 people. Now there are 1.3 million people living there. And this is particularly relevant for a number of different reasons. And when it comes to cash, and we'll get into that, that creates issues with financial service provider capacities, but also liquidity capacities and markets, for example. And we'll get into that later in the presentation. There's been a risk of famine confirmed through the IPC analysis. There were 2 rounds of that. 95% of the population now is in phase 3 or above of the IPC. And finally, and that's a bit of general context, Gaza and West Bank, have very different context, but also had and still have different governments, de facto authorities in Gaza, the Palestinian Authority in West Bank, but also humanitarian operations system. There were 2 different cluster systems that are leading up to a single HCT, but kind of working as 2 systems. But quite interestingly, there was one common social protection system run by the PA in Ramallah. And again, there was a functioning cash working group existing in Gaza, also connecting to the West Bank one, and we also have a national structure for cash coordination. In terms of market FSP situation, again, just to give few highlights. I know this was one of the questions that apparently was most interesting for everyone, and it's not surprising. So I'm going to give few highlights here on markets and FSPs, and then in Q&A section we can expand. And Ahmed probably is better positioned to expand on this. Now, the formal market system has collapsed. That's something we are all aware of, and is consistently reported in all reports. And quite early into the crisis, and most importantly, since I would say January onward, the informal market, so street vendors, stalls, people selling from the trucks, people selling out of their houses or wherever they are, is already dominating the economic activity in Gaza. The picture is taken actually from the New York Times, but it's quite representative of the situation. There were price fluctuations, major ones, since the 7th of October. Overall, there's been a general increase, significant one, from pre-crisis level. But it's also true that things really keep moving up and down when it comes to market. It's important to notice, and that's something that not maybe everyone is aware of, that pre-crisis, the Gaza economy, the Gaza market was very stable. It was a very unique situation, of course, but in terms of prices, for example, was very stable. We never had major spikes. Even during COVID, we didn't have major spikes. Since the 7th of October, that's not the case anymore. Things go up and down, and it's really difficult to monitor them because the changes are not even by week, by hour sometimes, So that's something we have been facing a lot of challenging in monitoring. There are about, trucks. That's something everybody's talking about. Now trucks enter through Rafah, so the border with Egypt, and Kerem Shalom, which is the border with Israel, mainly then coming from Jordan. There are about 22,000 trucks entering. Now this is only 32% of normal entries pre-crisis, and that doesn't consider them basically until the 27th of November, if I'm not wrong, there were no trucks at all coming in. So there have been over a month where no new goods were imported into Gaza. So that created a gap compounded by displacement, and now we're standard, or there's a more percentage of what was the entry of goods. Now, it's important to notice that only 10% of those are from the private sector. The vast majority is from humanitarian agencies, humanitarian donors, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, for example, that distribute, through in-kind or through, hospitals or whatever is needed. And private sector is particularly important. That's what really is keeping this small market, the informal market working and allowing, therefore, cash assistance. And it's important to keep that cash assistance as an equalizer, and I get into that later on in the presentation. And again, the limit number of private sector and supply chains, if you private supply chains, it's also contributing to the prices fluctuations. As somebody reported during some meetings, we are down to the situation in which if a truck arrives in an area, the prices go down. If tomorrow the trucks doesn't arrive, the prices go up again. And it's really complex to monitor. And it's also complex to make sure, things arrive, and in-kind distributions pose a lot of issues. There have been reports, of course, of assistance being resold. That's not surprising, happens everywhere. And that also, however, contributes to that informal market situation. Again, in the Q&A, we can expand more on markets, and I think Ahmed will be best positioned, to give you a lot of other details. Now, in terms of FSPs, there is one financial service provider, which is called PalPay, which is a Palestinian financial service provider, is the only one functioning, really. At least able to distribute across the Gaza Strip. They had different services pre-crisis. Now there is only one working. Fortunately, it's the one we managed to use for cash assistance. But consider that even in their case, there were 250 agents, pre-crisis in Gaza. Now we are down to 50, 70, if it's a good day, 30, 25 is a bad day, so the cash out points have really diminished, while the people in need of cash assistance, of course, have spiked, across this. And finally, liquidity. That's something we'll get into in the challenges, and that's, for your knowledge, also a bit of the focus of the cash working group in these days. There is cash in Gaza. Gaza has historically been full of cash, as somebody reported. However, the problem is moving it, especially from the north, where Gaza City is, where most of banks, deposits, etc., to the south, where most of the people are now, and then getting into the ATMs, And I know there will be a question about ATMs later on, so we can expand on that. Now, the Bank of Palestine, which is really the only one being able to keep working, has been working hard really to guarantee cash availability in PalPay agents. And we can, again, in the Q&A, if you want, we can get into more details of how that actually works. But unfortunately, so far, that's posing a lot of challenges, especially, again, in the south, where the largest concentration of people is now. Just checking if Ahmed is in, Manal.
Can you hear me, Lucas?
Yes, Ahmed, Habibi.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Good morning, colleagues. Apology for this technical issue. Yeah, we'll go to the market and FSP. Well, of course, Gaza market, pre-crisis is considered one of the stable market. Of course, there was, some issues related to the commercial trucking, and as all of you know, Gaza crossing is 100% controlled by the Israeli government. So Gaza crossing and movement of the trucks and supplies, it depends on the opening and closure policies and decisions by the Israeli government. Gaza is, as Luca mentioned in the introduction, is a small territory, a small place. Where largely we depend on commodities coming to Gaza from outside Gaza. Of course, there is, some agricultural activities, there is some poultry activities, which of course supply to the market. But again, mainly we depend on commodities coming from overseas. But in terms of inflations, in terms of prices, it's quite stable compared to other markets. During the crisis, of course, the market has been affected. There was a cut of the chain supply. Crossings were closed initially. There is no commodities coming into Gaza. Of course, there is a very limited storage capacity in Gaza. So basically, the commodities depleted after a month or so from the Gaza. However, Gaza market have shown a great resilience, and we start witnessing the revival of the informal markets, where people started to substitute commodities which is missing from the market or is not entering Gaza Strip. Of course, this informal market was very much depending on good, level of trade from people selling, vegetables, which they can, if they have access to the agricultural lands or areas near the agricultural lands. Of course, some people start to do some negative coping mechanism, for example, selling their, cattle, sheep, chicken from chicken farms because there is no feeders, there is no food coming into Gaza. So people start selling. So these items continue to be sold in the market. Of course, we have witnessed also a fluctuation on the prices due to the shortages of some items, especially when at early stage was wheat flour and sugar, for example. But then over the time, it has been decreased or increased, depends on humanitarian aid coming into Gaza, which played an important factor on market stabilities. And why that? Because many of the people selling, part of their humanitarian assistance, not because they don't need it, but because they don't have the means to use it, especially for displaced people who are in shelters where there is no cooking facilities coming into. There is no cooking or designated cooking places for their homes, and of course they don't want to lose it, especially on the winter seasons. So this was one of the issues. Other than that. Of course, when it comes to the trucks or the percentage, just to show how much the informal market was affected. For example, since 7th of October, only 22,000 trucks have entered Gaza, which represent 32% of the normal entries usually come pre-crisis. And out of the overall truckloads coming into Gaza, it's only 10% for the private sector. So you can imagine how much low basically the incoming commodities to the Gaza. However, since 27 November, we start witnessing an increase of the number of truckloads coming to Gaza, which this gives a hope that there would be hopefully a recovery of the formal market, and this definitely will help people to get access on the commodities and what they need. But overall, as on the opening statements, as my colleague Luca said, still, there are form of trade happening in Gaza and never stopped. And definitely people can manage to get what they want and what they need from time to time. Definitely not everything, but there is access to some kind of commodities which help people to survive and also to use the cash assistance which they are receiving. In terms of BalPay and the financial service providers, we have only one financial service providers operating currently in Gaza, which is BalPay. Most of our NBCA actors are basically working through BalPay. They have a good network of agents, around 250 pre-crisis. However, agents are basically part of the Palestinian society or the Gazan society, so they are subject to what's happening and the military operations. So a majority of them were displaced. So some of them were able to re-operate from the displacement locations. Some they cannot. But in terms of operation, again, some they can work today, maybe they will not, they cannot operate or work tomorrow, but then next week, maybe the work depends upon the environment around them. And here I'm talking about, for example, accessibility to electricity, where they can charge, internet availability, because it's important for the codes. Here basically the relationship between Balbi and the way is the redemption done. Partner sends the beneficiary list to Balbi. Balbi send codes to the beneficiaries. Beneficiaries take the codes with their IDs to the agents. After they do the verifications, they cash out. Of course, here about liquidity issue, which is recently we start having this issue in the past few weeks, and I believe Luca touched base on this about the root cause of the issue is not the availability of the liquidity or cash in Gaza, and this is one of the things which, from the very first days of the crisis, myself and Luca, we contacted the banks to inquire if there is enough cash in Gaza and liquidity to enable cash assistance, and the answer was yes. And even at some points we got some figures how much liquidity are available in Gaza. However, due to the military operations right now and the challenges which not only financial sectors is facing in terms of movement inside Gaza, but this is an issue also is faced and experienced by other kind of humanitarian assistance. For example, it's very challenging to coordinate movement of food assistance from south to the north. The same problem is happening with the financial sectors. It's very challenging to move cash from one branch to another branch or from one location to another location. It's a very long procedures where, approval is required, and sometimes at the last minute, even the approval is cancelled, or the whole missions is stopped at the last minute at one of the military points, being delayed and ended up being cancelled. So basically, this is one of the major concerns which we are having, which contribute to the shortage of liquidity, is the inability of the banks, especially Bank of Palestine, to move cash from one area to another area. Of course, there is some work has been done to work with the financial service providers on this regards, and definitely we'll touch base on this on other slides. Now, in terms of the characteristics of the MBCA, so basically, from the very beginning of the crisis, as I mentioned earlier, of course, we established contact with the financial service providers to inquire about their ability to operate, liquidity, availability of cash, but also was the identification on the caseload. Of course, from the very first days of the conflict, was very much clear that it's created a huge number of IDPs. And they were seen as the most affected people from the very first days of the conflict. So we had a quick, I believe on the 4th or 5th day of the emergency with Ministry of Social Developments to agree on a way where if there is a registration are set on place, and how we can coordinate and to ensure also that we have Ministry of Social Development as a governmental body, and also as the official body which is responsible on the social protection, and they are our partners in terms of humanitarian assistance, to be on board with us, and also to take their role as a government entity on this regards. So basically there was registration done by Ministry of Social Development, but also agencies and members. Of course, also they were doing their own registration in Gaza through their partners, local partners, and also through the network they have established pre-crisis to work in collaboration with local bodies and local initiatives as well. And of course, it was very much important for us to, ensure that NGOs has the rule also to do their own mapping and registration and also identification of potential case load. So this was also a second source of list. Of course, the other source, which is the National Social Registry, which again managed by Ministry of Social Development, which definitely has a good caseload of pre-crisis of information about vulnerability pre-crisis for people who are benefiting from the social protection and benefit from Ministry of Social Development's assistance as considered to be among most vulnerable people. Most of these people are basically either displaced people, either disabled people, and sometimes like elderly people who are benefiting from government assistance. And then we have the referral. I think that the key issue here was to make sure that despite having all these different sources of lists, but to maintain that all it's one list, meaning that it's all has to be consolidated and through Ministry of Social Development or to be sent to Ministry of Social Development where all these are consolidated, and then we receive it as the cash working group for nomination for potential assistance. And even if there is a nomination done by the Ministry of Social Development, we are informed about these nominations in order to make sure that there is no duplication and have one source of beneficiary nomination. And this was, I think, one of the key issue which has helped us to control the nomination process and the rest. Of course, referral was one of the issues. However, it works in some cases. It didn't work for other cases, but referral definitely is also a source of information. Now, the second step was about like avoiding duplication. So even if there is nomination done, again, how to make sure that there is no duplication or to avoid any potential duplications. So basically, all the after the nomination sent to the agencies, all the names before sending or giving the final go ahead to send this list to the financial service provider to start the process of encashment, usually sent to the cash working group information management, where we do final cross check on these names to make sure there is no duplications. If there is duplications, definitely we will inform that the partners and we say these people have already been targeted or on the targeting list by other organizations. So please select other beneficiaries. And this way we have managed to, reduce duplication as much as we can, and proven to be very effective. Now, of course, at the beginning of the crisis, it was very simple Excel sheet, the process, but then we have through the time, nobody was expecting that this emergency will continue this long. But given the fact that it's continued all this time, then we moved on to developing a small database where we can capture all this information and do the duplication process as well. Data protection concern remains, of course, an issue. As I said, the beginning was we send this list or we exchange the list through Excel sheet. However, recently there is in secured files is being used between partners with codes to ensure some kind of protection. Also, we are not having the database online, again, because of security issues. It's still locally managed. But definitely this is an area where we need to touch base and to discuss how to improve protection and to consider or to take under consideration all protection concerns in the future. Go ahead.
So
Okay.
after identification and duplication, when it comes to targeting, and what I would like to highlight here for all this process in the next slide as well is that these were all elements that we discussed together with the MPCA group, which again we'll explain later on. And there were decisions we made all together, you know. So really, I'm trying to work as a joint program, if you want, you know, throughout these elements. Now, in terms of targeting, we really kept it very relaxed in terms of principles, leaving then partners to apply internal criteria based on mandates and strategies. Now, we did set some of the criteria, as Ahmed was saying, from the beginning, and they evolved over time together with the situation, you know. So, for example, at the beginning, the focus was on IDPs outside of UNRWA shelters, so shelters managed by UNRWA, with the assumption that those were at least receiving some level of assistance, other were not getting that anyway. Then we dropped, for example, the UNRWA shelter criteria when we quickly realized we had no way to validate, you know, that information. You know, so it was a void kind of criteria. Then we moved to considering basically everyone affected, adopting almost a blanket approach. And now we're working on that, especially, you know, the recent flash appeal, there was at least trying to bring back some vulnerability criteria. We're very at the very beginning of that kind of discussion, also considering really the widespread, massive vulnerability in Gaza. But the criteria has moved along with us, you know, throughout the emergency. Back to you, Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Luca. Now we'll go for the characteristics of the MBCA transfer value. Of course, we have already pre-crisis have done the exercise of with the cluster coordinators, and we have developed our MAP. And I think this is one of the issues which we considered in preparedness, that also while we were having the exercise of developing the MAP, also to develop the SMAP, Survival Minimum Expenditure Basket, which to be considered or to identify transfer value during a crisis. So originally we start with the value was 60% of the SMIB, which is an equivalent to 754 shekels. But as a result of the price increase and the fluctuation in the market, we decided to move it to 1,000 shekel, which is basically 80% of the original value of the MIB. Now, I think the unique thing here is how this has been done. I mean, usually when we revise the MIB, it has to involve cluster coordinators, it has to involve you know, agencies as well. But in this particular situation, it was very challenging to do this exercise in the middle of this emergency. So we have decided to take a light approach in this regards. Of course, in coordination with the cluster coordinators, instead of opening the exercise of having a full revision of the MIB, we decided to increase the value, the original value, which is 60% to 80%, and that in a way to cope, as I said, with the price increase. Of course, all the cluster coordinators agreed on this and has been, you know, approved by the ICCG, and we moved forward on this regards. In terms of frequency, Of course, originally the SMIP was designed to be up to 3 payments, but of course, as of the overwhelming needs and because of the overwhelming number of IDPs, the focus was shifted to first payment in order to provide assistance to as much affected people as we can. Of course, now in the flash appeal, the focus again was on 3 payments. So hopefully, with the new fund, the new projects, we'll be able to do 3 months. Of course, some of the partners have done second payments for most vulnerable groups based for the pre-crisis vulnerabilities. But again, one of the exercises which we are doing right now, even again in targeting, is also to identify new vulnerabilities as a result of the ongoing conflict. But this is by itself, it's not an easy exercise, given that there is still no interagency, intersectoral assessments have been done. Security situation are not allowing more in-depth assessments to identify these cases. So basically, we depends on the information coming from the ground, where cluster to clusters, or what our partners can collect information from the grounds. In terms of the distribution mechanisms, as I mentioned earlier, we depends on our partner Balbe as the only operating financial service providers. It's very much we depends on cordless PIN codes, which is sent usually by SMS to the beneficiaries. Through these codes, they redeem their cash, and of course, we have a cash out, agents across the Gaza Strip who are operating. But again, as I said earlier, these people, the cash agents are operating based on the security situation and their ability to operate. Of course, beneficiaries were given up to 2 months to cash out to give them some flexibility on choosing the right time when they feel safe to cash out. In terms of monitoring, of course, we have a basic monitoring indicators, and was agreed upon by implementing agencies. I think one of the important one was the cash out rate, which was very important for us to consider on this. That's how was giving us an idea on how the redemption is, the cash out is happening, and if there is any challenges is being faced, and also we have different also monitoring, which is the BDM, which captured the impact of the assistance on the people, which definitely my colleague Luca will touch more and explain more on this regards.
Just
Sure.
from my side, guys, we have, because we want to keep time for Q&A, so we will have around 15 minutes for the presentation.
Sure.
So if we can wrap it up. Thank you.
Sure. So now in terms of market monitoring effort, this has been one of the elements we probably had more headaches about, how to do it, what's possible. It's needed. We know it's needed. It's one of the bases of our work. But then security and access conditions really did not allow any proper market assessment. So we really had to be flexible and creative, in doing that. And we had a number of initiatives discussed together from single agencies that we're trying to bring together. And I'm just going to give a quick overview. There were some that were initiated but discontinued. We had key informants interviews done with humanitarian workers in Gaza. That was led by Reach with the support of cash actors. We had supermarket monitoring. So physically, we agreed within the MPCA coordination group that cash actors would, dedicate somebody in the morning to sit down and call on the phone supermarkets in Gaza and just ask questions. So we had a quick market survey. I think there were 5 questions in total. just to try to get some information, which otherwise were very, very much difficult to obtain. And same went for PalPay agents. We had cash actors. We took the list of agents, and we had cash actors physically calling them in the morning, every morning, to see who was working, who was not working, who had his shop still standing, who had his POS machine with him, who had access to liquidity, how many cases they might be able to distribute in that day. And then we're keeping a log of these, for the benefit of the larger group. Now, these elements were discontinued because they were not really sustainable. They were a major burden for organizations, very time consuming, but also with time, they yield less and less results. We had days where out of maybe 60, 70 PalPay agents that we knew were potentially working, maybe we had only 2 picking up their phones because there was no connectivity. And then maybe out of these 2, only 1. For one of them, the line was so bad we couldn't even understand what he was saying, And so at a certain point, we had to discontinue these elements. But there are others that are still ongoing. We started. There is an informal market assessment that CRS, which is one of the agencies leading on the distribution of multipurpose caches, started back in November, which is still ongoing, which produced also one of the first insights, I would say, some of the first insights on this informal market situation. We had PDM questions, as Ahmad just mentioned, that were tweaked for market understanding, So questions around goods availability, access, expenditures were used as proxies to understand, to try to get an understanding of market. And here is really about trying to get context. One of the key challenges, because of the massive telecommunication cuts, which we're getting into the challenges section, was really to get in contact with people in Gaza. So anytime we could do that, then we were using it as much as possible to get information, maximizing any small contact with people in Gaza. There are rapid market overviews that are produced by Rich, compiling the data from the informal market assessment, from the PDM questions, from authorities, from other available market information. And then, of course, WFP has always been producing on a regular basis their markets overview, which remain an authority in terms of market data. The key point here is that we really try to be creative and flexible. We need to move away from more traditional market data collection tools and really try to adapt to scattered bits and pieces of information and how we bring them together and how we build an understanding of market out of that. And we really had to work together on this with the support also of Rich and other, of course. Another element that was quite new to the cash working group was advocacy. Now, at least in Gaza, the cash working group has basically never engaged really with advocacy per se, but we had to do that here. Very briefly, many of you, I hope you guys saw those products. We put out a few advocacy products. Now, the key message we had around most of these is that in-kind cannot possibly support 2.2 million people even in the short, but definitely in the medium and longer term. So cash is needed, Cash is very much needed to help, the people in Gaza meet that basically. So we have 3 publications here. One is The Moment Is Now, was a call for fund we put out at the beginning of the crisis, really saying markets proved resilient. We don't know for how long this will be the case. So now is the moment to act with cash assistance. That was circulated, that I think many of you, I hope, saw that. And then we put out a couple of others with the support of a CDA task team made up of cash experts around the region, an open call for action with scenarios-based recommendations, and looking at markets and telecommunication scenarios, and then note on the importance of the private sector, which again, it's one of the key elements that also, this was the screenshot of the first advocacy tool. Specifically on the importance of the private sector, we also liaised with the RC office, and we made sure cash and markets elements were included in the HC-RC talking points, that she at the time, now the person changed, so she at the time was using in her briefings, in her talks, in her meetings with different stakeholders. And there was, I think, a very positive step to make sure we get our message to the highest level possible. We had donor briefings and dedicated reports, and we also kind of collaborate with other clusters. So we had situations in which other clusters were having donor briefings. We kind of sneaked inside this cash working group and had our presentation that. So really maximizing any possibility to talk to as many people as possible on the key messages we wanted to pass. We had an internal FAQ document that was created at the beginning and then updated also with the support of the of people in HQ of some of the organizations, member of the Cash Working Group. That was really meant to ensure we have one voice, one messaging, one language when talking externally as Cash Working Group operational actors. There are a lot of questions, some very sensitive one as well being asked, especially at the beginning. And again, we'll touch on that in the challenging section. And we really wanted to make sure, we work again as one body, all together, not only in terms of implementation, but also in terms of external advocacy. And then we had recently produced a document about liquidity challenges, which is also leading to high-level discussions, which Ahmed will touch on in a second. Ahmed, over to you quickly on the actors' position and discussions we had around that.
Yes, I will go very quickly on this, colleagues. I mean, basically, what we have done, we ask people formally and informally about their preferences on cash assistance, and the majority of the response was people are preferring unrestricted cash assistance, and it was always mentioned. And the majority of the people feel that cash assistance can reach them in faster than in-kind assistance, and also give them the chance and the opportunity to choose and to prioritize according to their needs. Also, the objective was very much to make sure that people can, get whatever they needs, whatever they choose at the time they feel they can have access to this commodities. So that was the very objective on this, and I think we've succeeded, given that the visibility and the effectiveness we have adopted and have been proven through the implementation of cash programming and MPC. So that was basically very much. Also, cash works as an equalizer, and we use this word just to make sure that there is a balance. Not all what people needs are met through the traditional in-kind assistance. So definitely, cash will give them the opportunity to have this balance and to maintain or get the chance to get what they need. Next, please.
Perfect. So very quickly, now we said all that, but just to give you a sense of, okay, what have we been, what cash has been looked like so far. So we started the response about on the 13th of October. We have about 17 agencies involved, some of them with recurring distributions, big numbers, some others with more on-spot, delivery of cash. We managed to reach about 172,000 households now, with at least one shot, which is about 1,176,000 individuals, which is pretty good, for a total of about 160 million shekel. Cash out rates, which Ahmed was mentioning before, are an important proxy again to understand, to assess feasibility of cash, stand about 72% across the response. Now, in the past few weeks, they've dropped because of some issues that we're getting into in a second, but across the response, they stand about 72%. And now we did PDM, of course. Now, first important thing, PDM was, started together, done together, harmonized together by the whole group. And that's where we try to work together. And the agency's commitment to a common set of questions is what really allowed, response at level and analysis. Now, very quickly on, this is one of the, of course, key indicators here on capacity of meeting basic needs. It's a bit tweaked the language, but this is just to give you an idea, on the question, has MPCA helped you cover some of your urgent needs, your household urgent needs? The vast majority of people always said, yes, some of them, which is good enough, I believe, at the moment. And then we had variations on those who said all, those who said no. There seemed to be a slight improvement in the last round in April, but we need to be very cautious about that. I will also highlight from a methodological point of view that This graph is, the first October, December, and the last March, April are based on thousands and thousands of PDMs. The January, February one, for a number of reasons, it's based on about 700 only. So they might not be super comparable, but I just wanted, as an indicative graph to give you an idea. Now, in terms of expenditure, what people spend on, this is March results only. It keeps changing over the weeks. For example, food has always been the largest expenditure, but then you had water, medicines. Lately, debt repayment also, they kept, fighting for the second position, on the most reported expenditures. But this is to give you an idea. Of course, the majority goes on food, drinking water available. Medicines has always been a very high one, and then few others. At the very beginning, hygiene products were also, for example, very high in expenditures, because for a good part of October and November, they were the only items that were consistently reported in markets. Then that got depleted as well, and went down. Interestingly so, and just to close on this, virtually no one said they could not spend the assistance, or like 0.01%. It really shows that there are places, there is a market, there is an economy for you to spend on. Then prices, availability, access, are all challenges we are facing, but the market is there, it's resilient. And again, PDM activities are used as entry points for market understanding, really making a maximum, as I was saying before, of the small contacts we have in Gaza. Okay, so moving to the second section of our presentation, we'll try to go quick. We have a couple of very dense slides on challenges, which I think are particularly important. I'm handing over to Ahmed for both. We'll try to keep it to 5 minutes for all those slides. Over to you, Ahmed.
Thank you very much. I'll try to go as quick as I can. Yeah, so we have identified 8 challenges, but of course the situation is still ongoing and we may face other challenges. But right now the main challenge is the security situation. Again, it's war. It's very difficult time. It's a military operation, ground military operations. Of course, the civilians are being impacted, has a toll on the civilian death and injuries, and also the infrastructure, including financial sector as well, infrastructures, including also electricity, communications, which we will touch base on this. So what we do in order what did we do in order to mitigate as much as we can? Of course, the very first thing we thought about is expand the cash out instead of giving people short period of time to cash out. So we decide like they can have up to 2 months. In this period, they can choose what is the best time for them to go out and try to cash out. Also, we have did some kind of facilitate accessibility to cash assistance through massive network of agents, and that was the objective, is like have as much agents as we can scattered across the Gaza Strip in different in almost all locations and locality, to minimize the movement of beneficiaries from one area to another area, not to put them at risk while they are trying to cash out. Electricity and telecommunications was one of the main challenges in Gaza, and in this particular conflict, electricity is not cuts and telecommunication cuts not only as a result of damage of the military of the bombardment or the operations only, but also was used deliberately was cut, especially telecommunication and internet from Gaza by the Israeli authorities, and sometimes it lasts for a week or days. And this is not only affected the cash out rate or our cash assistance, but also have an impact on the entire humanitarian response operation, and will continue. Till now, still there is no electricity in Gaza. Unfortunately, it's only depends on whatever available power generators and solar panels. Now, what we do in this, we included in telecom and the cash working group advocacy products and key messages, to highlight the importance of this. Also, we did some monitoring of the telecommunication connectivity through the AAB group, which is led by OCHA. and also with the telecommunications group. So they give us the opportunity to know where is the connectivity and where is the challenge across the Gaza Strip. Now, financial service providers functionality, of course, as I said earlier, most of, the agents are, were displaced. Some of them were able to, operate from their displacement locations. Some they are not. There was frequency on where, when, and they can operate. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it's not like a steady X number of agents, or this particular agents can operate all the time. No, it keeps fluctuating. Of course, the accessibility of cash to ATM is one of the concerns. I should mention that from the very beginning there was an agreement between Bank of Palestine and Bal Bay, for example, to grant permission to Bal Bay agents to get up to the equivalent to $10,000 in a daily basis to enable them for the cash out, which is a huge amount of money compared to the cash out withdrawal limit for the general population. Of course, the safety and security of the agents was very much. Now, unfortunately, we start to face some other challenges in terms of fees, but in this particular issue here, what we did, we set a daily monitoring on the agent functionality, and I think Lucas mentioned about this also, calling and on who is functioning and sharing this with the partners, so they are aware on who's operating from the agents in which area, and disseminate this information and share it. Agreed also with the financial service provider Bal Bay ongoing discussion to join monitoring and facilitate fuel delivery. This because this is another one issue which they are facing. They don't have fuel to conduct, monitoring to the agents. And also to continue their operations. Of course, we have approached the humanitarian system and coordination system in order to have them benefit from the fuel allocations scheme, which is currently on place to help NGOs to respond to this emergency. Extra fees. Unfortunately, we start seeing that extra fees is being used due to the shortage of liquidity. Now, this is not only for the cash programming, but it's also for all affecting all money or financial transactions coming from overseas or taking place in Gaza. But as a cash actor, unfortunately, we are taking the heat on that. So despite our efforts to minimize or to end this negative practices from some agents who start to taking extra fees from the beneficiaries, we cannot control what's happening on other financial transactions, happening between the society. But the negativity is always coming, and a question is raised to us. Agents are taking extra fees. We have done a number of issues in tackling this, including, at the cash working group, coordinating with the group, and then we propose some solutions, giving an extra fees, 2% on the original fees they are taking temporarily for 3 months. Worked with encouraged Bal Bay to work with the agents to have them sign, some legal documents, prohibiting them from taking an extra fees. And also we propose some kind of orientations on our code of conducts, our humanitarian principles, in order to control this as well. Liquidity challenge, as we said it earlier, and unfortunately we have this issue, liquidity now shortage in the past few weeks, which again impacting all humanitarian and Gaza economy response and Gaza economy, and also market and potential recovery in Gaza. So this is our position as cash working group. Liquidity challenge is not only specific to the cash assistance, but it will affect all aspects in Gaza Strip, and we've mentioned this very much clear in all our communications with different entities. Of course, we have done many initiatives to support Bank of Palestine to, in this area. Even we have communicated with different UN agencies, including political colleagues from the political side of the UN systems. We advocated to create a group which can have a representation from the financial service providers and from UN entities, Palestinian Authority, in order to tackle this issue and find some solutions for this.
Ahmad, let's try to wrap up in 1 minute, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Now, the other challenges is like data protection. I have mentioned this. So we, we start or we are working currently on, centralizing the data and the sharing through having a database as well. But it's one of the issue which we want to continue working on to improve. In terms of market functionality, of course, again, the collapse of the formal market, but also we have seen multiple initiatives again in understanding the market and also monitoring the market. But also we see that there is a number of tractors coming into Gaza with the hope that the situation will improve. Skepticism is very much on the political perception of the cash assistance and the fear or the concerns from the donors where the cash will end up. Will end up to the right people or not, to the right beneficiaries or not. So we have to do a lot of communications and organize sessions, bilateral and in general, to address this issue. And we have developed the internal explanatory notes, fact sheets to harmonize our position on this regards and to try to address all the concerns and provide answers regarding the use of cash and where it ends.
Okay. Thanks a lot. So for the sake of time, guys, we'll maybe skip the next 2 slides and just move quickly to the lesson learned, and then closely we can open up, of course, during this section. The next 2 slides were on private sector engagement. Key message being, private sector. We're working with the private sector as a partner, not as a contractor. We can expand more in the Q&A, and on coordination again. We'll come back if interesting in the Q&A. Very quickly on lesson learned, guys. We identified some. It's very early. We are still in the middle of the response. The situation is still tragic, if you want. So it's very, very difficult to stop identify lesson learned. But very quickly, some we got. The emergency situation required creativity and flexibility. We try to be very flexible, relaxing standards. In general, the fact that cash is working, I think, goes against the odds, of course, a bit of, cash feasibility standards that you would find in months, etc. So in terms of being able to be flexible, also creative in what you can get and how you can work what you get. Preparedness is key for a quick response. I guess, this is not a surprise. Thanks to that, we were able to start working within a few days or start distributing within a few days, Communication and advocacy, and that goes back to the last challenge Ahmad was mentioning, but also what we said before, effective and timely communication and advocacy for a cash working group is as important as technical and operational work. That's something we realized quickly. One thing is making these things sound right, technically perfect, but then being able to communicate and advocate for those is also a key element for a cash working group or CDA community. Context, fluidity and predictability require proper communication language around cash actors and operations. Again, communication, decision-making process needs to be, lighten up a lot, and that's what we did by involving only operational actors in decisions. We really moved from a larger cash working group to a smaller operational actors group of MPCA actors, those actually doing it on the ground, because those are the one impacted by decisions. Those are the one that need to make decisions. Referrals needs to be there. It's very challenging to establish a referral system during emergencies. That might not be a surprise for many of you, but because we did not have one, we realized that's one of the lessons learned. Now, the last 2, I think, are also particularly important. One, moving as one body. MPCA response is very homogeneous. You're all doing pretty much the same thing. So what is needed is to work collectively, and that's something we managed to do as a cash working group. We really worked as a joint program, not coordinating different single agencies projects, but it is a one joint program. We sat together. We say, okay, how much we need? What are the needs? What are the targets? How are our collective targets? Our collective financial ask? We did it all the steps. That I think was a very positive very positive practice, and the lesson learned, the best practices for the future. And the last one is that cash coordination needs to be properly resourced. We had few people coming in to help on spot, ad hoc, here, there, people with 3 hats, coming to help for a few things. But cash coordination needs to be properly restored if we want to be technical and operational, efficient and effective. Sorry, we went super long, Manal, back to you.
No worries, Luca. Thank you, Luca and Ahmad. I know there is quite an interest, and I think we can share with a recording on the website. And for those, we're going to go into questions. We have collected questions prior, and I know I can see there's quite a lot of questions on the Q&A. So Ahmad and Luca, if you can answer while also answering other questions. In the end, we will collect them all and kind of share with everybody the answers for these questions. If I can, starting with one of the questions that we had is being, if I'm mistaken, like in your opinions, do you believe in-kind response is more effective in this situation? Because there was a lot of questions regarding in-kind.
Well, I think what we have stated clearly from the very beginning, both are very much needed in the context of Gaza, cash assistance and in-kind assistance as well. So it's really hard to prefer one over the other because of the great needs. People are on the edge of famine, and definitely the need to have food. Of course, cash assistance very much important to and give the people the flexibility to get their unmet needs, and there is a wide understanding and of the importance of the cash assistance, but in kind definitely is needed as well as cash in such a situation. Hybrid approach is very much preferable and recommended in such situation.
Absolutely, and this also based on what we said during the presentation, the cash working is an equalizer because it helps people access things, so selling and reselling and circulation of goods, including assistance, so the two are really working together to really get to the last mile where in-kind alone cannot get.
Thank you. And if I can continue with that, Luca, from one of the participants they included, is there any chance for mobile wallet in the future? Is there a setup for that in Gaza?
So there was a setup. Mobile wallets were one of the options. Was one of the there were a couple of FSPs. One also being used for humanitarian assistance. That was providing mobile wallets. PalPay themselves have a mobile wallet option. I mean, we are using this cardless PIN codes, but in reality, they have they're a private company offering services to the general population. So they have a number of different services. So the setup is there. Telecommunication is not the strongest in Gaza, but I think they managed to work around these issues, allowing kind of offline options that then connect to mobile wallets. There were discussions, I remember last year, around allowing, correct me if I'm wrong, but allowing needed infrastructure to improve the quality of internet into Gaza. Now, of course, now we live in a new world, so we don't know if any of these will happen. At the moment, there are no mobile options available. We did get in contact with the one that was working before, right after the outbreak, and they said they had no capacities, and I think it's mainly for two reasons. One, they had not that strong link to actual physical financial institution. PalPay was created, now is an independent company, but it was created in partnership somehow with the Bank of Palestine. So they were really relying on the financial infrastructure of Bank of Palestine, which is as it says, Bank of Palestine. So it really allowed them to survive because they were relying on a very strong financial infrastructure. Others were not. And that led to them not being able to work. And also PalPay had offline and online options, pure mobile ones. The moment telecommunication was disrupted, they were not able to work anymore.
Thank you, Luca. We had also a question stating, for organization wanting to conduct CVA in Gaza, what advice do you have, would you give regarding the volatility and violence affecting aid workers? What preparedness steps could be done while we wait for a ceasefire or time when access is granted? Ahmed, if you would like to take that question.
Yeah, thank you very much. In all the emergencies, the humanitarian respondents, humanitarian workers are always on the front line. And they are in many times in most of the emergencies, natural or man-made disasters are at risk. And that's the reality and the fact which we have to operate. Of course, there has to be mitigations, process, and to make sure that we have a safe operations as much as we can. But sometimes we cannot control what's happening on the ground. It's out of our hands. The unfortunate incidents which happens to our colleagues on the World Central Kitchen attract the attention of the international media and everybody. And of course, it's very tragic incidents. But at the same time, there is more than 178 colleagues from UN and other international organizations and local organizations have lost their lives in this conflicts as well, while choosing to continue to operate and to respond. So there is a risk, unfortunately, associated with our programs and facts. What I definitely advise them, of course, you have to take all the steps and the mitigation measures, consult with your security, of course, advisors before you establish any operations in Gaza. But when I was asked about this, I said, we cannot afford to stop our operations. People are in need in Gaza, and we have to continue responding. We have to continue to be present on the ground. CVA is very much important, very much critical in this response, identified, recognized, and acknowledged by all workers. If, again, we go back to people, they are asking us to continue in this modality of response because it's, proven, and they feel that it addressed their needs. So we have no choice but to continue. But again, as I said, my recommendation is, of course, you have to make sure and to take all the mitigations in order to ensure a safe operation and programming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. If I could ask, because we had several questions asking about duplication. And Luca, can you elaborate on what are the measurements that you're taking to identify duplication? Has there any been consideration to utilize blockchain for that issue?
We have a lot of good ideas and very little resources and times to put them in place. So for the moment, yes, for the moment, as Ahmed was saying before, we started working on Excel-based deduplication. What really worked was agreeing with the group on sources of names and the duplication process so that they was made clear and as effective as possible, and then dedicated resources. We had an IM officer from that OCHA lended us for this specific work, which Mohanad is still working on. We had internal discussions on, or not internal discussion, they are brainstorming in general on where next to go with that. That has historically been a bit of a gap in Palestine, so we are using the fact that we now had to do it for operational reasons to actually build on that for the future. So blockchain was something somebody put around, but we think we are still few steps behind that. OCHA is now working on setting up a database that will help us doing that more efficiently, more safely. But discussions are around, that's one of the priorities we need to look. We already agreed to look into, for the coming months, whether during the emergency response, but also fully very soon when the actual emergency will be over.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Yes, thank you very much. If we can move to the next question is, Ahmed, how do you see the use of group cash transfer as a modality to use in Gaza?
Well, group cash transfer is nothing new in Gaza. It has been done by partners before. I think, when, for example, our colleagues in DSA, they are taking the lead on this, and they are working also with MAN, and they are working with UNICEF and others. Now, I think it's very much needed. This is the first time we are having it on the flash appeal with the MBCA section. There is many projects are taking place right now through cash transfer. On this, there is supporting locally led initiatives, and which is really important here, having local initiatives to decide and prioritize what they want, and having the group cash transfer supporting their initiatives. And that is unique. Now, if we have some examples on what's happening right now in Gaza, we have women-led initiatives supported through cash transfer. Some having set up bakeries, which is very much needed right now in Gaza, given that most of the formal bakeries are not operating. Recently, they start to operate, but at some point there was a gap. Also with, small kitchen setup. We saw the impact of the World Central Kitchen, but unfortunately now they are not operating. So definitely there is this initiatives is very much supporting and helpful. So I think this is one opportunity. Group cash transfer is really important on an emergency situation to enable community-led initiatives to get together, design and choose, and prioritize where they want to intervene as most needed, and give them the needed support to continue on to do this. So briefly, of course, we can talk more about this, but just very briefly.
Thank you, Ahmed. I'm combining a couple of questions regarding ATM. So we have how useful, important were ATM in the cash cycle, and how do PalPay agents access cash themselves for payout through that increased cap on ATM's withdrawal for the agents? And since there is an issue with cash movement, is it still that ATM have liquidity for payout?
So you can take it up. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So in terms of ATMs were a key chain, piece of the chain. So PalPay agents, again, PalPay being the only one being able to distribute, to keep working at the scale we need, had agents that access cash through ATMs, Bank of Palestine ATMs. So PalPay agents, to become PalPay agents, it needs to have, or they create while becoming PalPay agents, a Bank of Palestine account. Okay, so through that, they get the money from the ATMs. Again, at the beginning of the crisis, the limit was raised to $10,000, about 37,000 shekel, depending on exchange rate. And the Bank of Palestine is always managed among major difficulties to refill ATMs. At the beginning, everywhere, then many in the south, then many in Rafah, then it depends. So there were those were also focus for Bank of Palestine to keep refilling. So they're really a key one. So agents get the money from the ATMs and then distribute to people through the process Ahmed described. The issue in moving around liquidity means, not now getting cash into the ATMs where the agents are, where you are distributing is the problem, and that's what we are trying to address. Sorry, Mona, there was a third part of the question that I think I'm missing.
Let me go back to the question. Well, about the feasibility refilling the ATMs. Sorry, I'm moving between questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a lot, but I cannot find it, and we will go back to it the minute I found the question.
Sure. Apologies.
No worries. One of the questions was regarding blanket distribution, blanket targeting, actually. And is blanket targeting really possible when funding is far below needs?
I think my take on this is that, in general, it's a very emergency-specific approach, which has been the case so far. But now, as we said, moving forward, because unfortunately this is staying with us for a while, we want to narrow it down. We had different problems. Funding has been an issue, especially at the beginning of the crisis. I remember talking to donors at a certain point. towards January, I think MPC was the second least funded cluster, even if it was not a cluster, in the flash appeal, right after education, which was, I think, really prioritized. So that was one of the issues. Now I think the issue is also moving to the actual feasibility of large-scale distributions. So we really need to balance between what we want to do, what we can do in terms of finances, and what we can do in terms of operations. So it is a fine balance. And that's a discussion we always had in the group. We never went for should we stop assistance. We always discussed around the topic of scaling up and down. Based on what the operation context allows us to do. So that's the kind of approach we have.
Thank you, Luca. I mean, I think we have the last 3 minutes. There's quite a lot of questions from our side. To finish on time, we will collect them all and have answers shared with everybody. I would like first to thank Luca and Ahmed taking the time to join us and giving us kind of the challenges and lessons learned on the Gaza cash response. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll post the recording, we'll share also the presentation, and all questions that have been posted online, we'll share the answers to as well, so you can access it and see the response from our different speakers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Manan, and to the CAP team.
Thank you, Manan, to the CAP team. Thank you, colleagues, for giving us the time to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you.